We always talk about some of the major events in history where they started, but we never asked the question of what it was. So a place like Moton is important because this isn't just Black history, this is history. Well, the museum was inspired by Barbara Rose Johns, who led the student walkout. She led a student-led walkout, called an assembly right in the auditorium just to talk about what was going on because she had enough of everything going on. It just, it wasn't equal. It wasn't equal to what the white schools had. And it was just downright disgusting to be here. So she did what she had to do. Then the state of Virginia practiced massive resistance. They just closed all the schools instead of giving Black students better schools. But later in the 60s, the Griffin Amendment was passed. And it allowed for schools to be integrated. And all the schools would reopen up.
Moton is important to have because it talks a lot about Farmville history in ways that people kind of are uncomfortable to talk about, but it's something really important. It's a discussion that needs to be had. When I first moved in, I had heard about the Moton. I knew it was like a must-see thing. For me personally, the first time I came to the Moton was because there was an event here. So I think hosting events in the Moton is a great way to get people to come in and see, because I was here for the event and I was like, oh, while I'm here, I'll just walk around and look at everything. And then I was like, wow, there's so much here. I need to come back and plan a day to look at everything. So I think that's really one great way. And then I would like to create a class about the history of Farmville, and I want to have on-site locations. So with that, people would come to the Moton for a day or two and look at everything.
I have been in town since 2006 and then started to use the museum for different projects and classes, even before the displays were done. So the Moton in the very beginning was an empty building that still had classrooms set up. That was a space really of dreams and intentions until it grew to have the kind of support that could necessitate a museum display like this. So I have really come to understand the Moton as sort of an educational hub. For me, it's a space and content that I bring into my classrooms, whether I'm teaching rhetorical criticism, for example. I've brought students here to talk about how the displays use word and image and color and design in order to promote the message or various messages that they've gotten or a visitor would get. I have used it in my capstone general education classes to help students think about ways that they could support the community, understand the community, do activities or actions in the community.
I came here for a class. My political science class had a field trip here and we toured the museum. It was my first time seeing everything, and I had never heard of Barbara Johns before touring the museum. So it was cool to see her process with the Brown versus Board of Education, all that stuff. That was really interesting. Especially living in Virginia and going to school in Farmville, it gives you an understanding of where we came from and where we're looking to go to. Because during that time period in the 50s and the 60s, there was obviously a lot of segregation and a lot of racism and discrimination against people of color and Black people. And when you see someone who's 16 years old, she couldn't even vote for who she wanted to be president or who she wanted mayor to be, but she was able to get students to stand behind her and realize that there was a problem and make a change for that problem. So this understanding that if I see something that's wrong, I can either sit idle and let it be wrong and don't say anything. I can acknowledge that it's wrong and don't do anything, or I can acknowledge that it's wrong and then do something.
Something that I learned from being at Moton is that life will always surprise you. It'll surprise you with opportunity, connections, as well as personal growth, and is experience. Not experience in the terms of growing myself, but experience and understanding that life has happened. Many people were affected by it. My history with the Moton is a lot of my aunts and uncles went here, and during that school closings, I know quite a bit of them. After the schools were opened back up, you were grown men and grown women at that time, and how my family worked at that during that was everyone worked. You worked, you provided for the household, no matter how young you were and how old you were. And I know my older aunts and uncles and cousins were always pushing education for like my time, when like people, for me, in my age bracket, in my family, to go to school, to get that education, because they know what it feels like to have it taken away instead of you just choosing not to go and be a little bit more educated.
I think there are so many ways to educate the student body about the Moton and the Moton's purpose and missions and things that they're trying to teach everyone about. Promoting students going and visiting, maybe like on the New Lancer days, telling students and reinforcing that idea that the Moton is a must-see, something you should definitely go do before you graduate.
So at a predominantly white institution such as ours, it's important for us not to have separate spaces where we just go, and here's the African American literature, and sort of separate out those issues and drop them in a largely white agenda. What happens when they come here is that it is an educational space that they spend a number of days in, and it is seen as American history, not Black history. This is American history, not Farmville history, or not only Farmville history. It's community history that's part of American history. I'd love to see a course that's required of students to understand their backyard. So we call this place-based learning. And I think it's really important for students to understand the skills and the processes it takes to understand the environment that you're in, not just on campus, but that's around you. So Farmville and the Moton allows them to do that. But that also helps them explore the public memory that they have been a part of, maybe at home, or that they maybe need to help to write in terms of history because of the knowledge they have from their own home.
I feel like some more teachers should do what my professor did. Let us do field trips here as a class. I feel like clubs can do events there. I feel like having events there will bring more traffic, at least know about the building in that aspect, and hopefully we'll come back to learn more about the history.
I think that when most people think of the Moton, it's either, oh, I need to go there, or it's, oh, I went there and it was amazing and here is all the cool things that I saw, or people work here and they just love it. Something I love about the Moton Museum is the flow when you're walking through, and how it advances with time as you're going through each room, and how big the pictures are. It's just a really beautiful space.
I thought that's very personable. So it's not like a huge museum, but it's very small, but it's like you see like the desk and stuff, and like I feel like you really can kind of like feel that you were like kind of like in the classroom that Barbara Johns was in while you're walking through it, which is kind of cool because it's kind of like this is what Barbara Johns was kind of feeling at this moment.
Museums by nature are educational spaces, but we usually go and take a day to visit one. You'll go to Richmond, and you will visit one, and then you'll go out to lunch. But the importance for me as an educator is that we come here and see it at length. We inhabit this space, so we might spend a lot of time in that classroom really understanding then what educational spaces were 60, 70 years ago, and what the citizens needed to do in order to make it better for all. So to me, this is more of a site of learning that I can use at any point, and that I can have students inhabit for many different purposes and for longer periods of time. In other words, we don't just tour through, come out to the auditorium, and we're done. We can spend more time talking about how this happened, how students reacted, what did it take to put together a committee that let us strike? What did it take to stand up to the legal maneuvers that were done by the county or different institutions to do what they wanted to do? And so students need to see so many parts. We come in here many times to see all those different ways.
Something I love about the Moton is the fact that when people hear that there's a museum where you grew up or near, they instantly want to go, of wanting to come and just learn and understand what happened, but actually just to come to it because it's like, well, why not? Like, we're right there. So that sense of not thinking twice about it and just going, definitely having these conversations, bringing people and letting them know this isn't just a boring museum in the middle of a small town. No, this is a pivotal piece of history that did not affect just blacks, but whites, Hispanics, Latinos, like Asians, but people from different walks of life, races and ethnicities. This is still a part of you, and to just actually come to a place where many walks of life of people have one thing in common, and for us to unite and understand that this one part that happened in history is very important and a piece of all of us.